A young pregnant woman, undocumented and alone, is stopped at a U.S. airport. Her suitcase raises no red flags, but the K-9 refuses to leave her side. What began as routine screening uncovers a haunting truth: she's a missing child from Florida, abducted 9 years ago. What follows is a journey of fear, identity, and survival you won't forget. Like and subscribe to follow stories that dig deeper, true tales that stay with you long after they end. The terminal was humming with the kind of casual chaos unique to international airports: rolling luggage, short tempers, and long waits. The overhead speakers repeated delayed flights in a loop, while in the corner of the baggage claim at LAX, the air grew tenser with every passing second. Officer Daniel Ruiz stood quietly holding the leash of Jet, a 5-year-old black Labrador trained for both narcotics and human trafficking alerts. Unlike the usual aggressive alert Jet gave when picking up on contraband, this time the dog's behavior was different. Focused, insistent, and increasingly agitated, Jet circled a young woman standing alone by carousel, six-tail stiff nose darting toward her midsection, then her backpack, then back again. The woman was perhaps 20, though her features were hard to pin down. Her hair was tied in a low knot with a rubber band, her clothes wrinkled, and simple loose jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a blue t-shirt that clung slightly to her body, revealing the unmistakable curve of late pregnancy. She had no luggage, no obvious travel companion, just a creased manila envelope clutched against her chest and a guarded expression that made her look older than she probably was. Jetio Ruiz said calmly, but the dog wouldn't budge. Instead, he let out a sharp bark and stepped closer to the woman. That was enough to warrant further attention. Ruiz nodded at his partner, Officer Kim, who stepped forward with a trained calmness. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said gently, but clearly. "May I speak with you for a moment?" The woman blinked, a flicker of panic flashing across her face. Her hands tightened around the envelope. "Sigh," she answered softly. "Do you speak English?" Little, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Officer Kim gestured to a nearby bench. "Please come sit. Just routine questions, nothing to worry about." The woman hesitated, then sat down slowly, Jet settling at her feet with eyes fixed on her belly. Ruiz knelt beside the dog, noting the change in posture. Jet wasn't signaling drugs or explosives. It was something else, behavior he'd only seen once or twice before, usually when Jet sensed high cortisol levels in distressed humans. That didn't explain why he was singling her out in a crowd of hundreds. "Can I see your passport, visa, any identification?" Kim asked. The woman reached into the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper worn at the corners. It was a customs declaration form filled in shaky handwriting. Name: Lucia M., nationality: Guatemala. Purpose of visit family. No passport, no ID, not even a boarding pass. Officer Kim raised an eyebrow. "Where did you fly in from?" Lucia hesitated. "Guatemala City. What airline?" A long pause. "I don't remember. Big plane." Kim and Ruiz exchanged a glance. People forget small details under stress, but not usually the airline they flew on. Kim softened her tone. "Who are you meeting here, family?" Lucia nodded. "My esposo, husband. You have his phone number?" She reached into the envelope again, but this time it was empty. She looked lost. I had." Ruiz gently took the form. "Lucia, do you know how far along you are?" he asked, tilting his head toward her belly. She lowered her eyes. 5 months, she said quietly. Ruiz noted the size and positioning of the bump. Not 5, at least 7. Kim stood. "Let's move her to secondary inspection. Something's not adding up." As they guided Lucia to a private area behind the customs counter, Jet remained unusually alert, tail stiff and ears perked. In the quiet room they asked again for any documentation, but she had nothing else. No medical records, no phone, not even a contact written down. Lucia didn't resist the questions, but her answers began to contradict. First, she said she'd lived her whole life in Guatemala, then mentioned a school that sounded more American than rural Central American. She said she didn't know her exact age, but thought she was maybe 20. Her English was inconsistent, fluent enough in some phrases, but then she'd stumble over simple words. Ruiz left the room and walked down to the database access point. A quick search of incoming flights from Guatemala yielded no matching passenger under the name Lucia M. in the last 72 hours. She hadn't come through official channels. Jet sat quietly outside the room, but Ruiz could see the dog was still watching the door. Something about her had triggered an alert, maybe not criminal in the traditional sense, but something deeply wrong. Back inside, Lucia stared at the floor as if she were waiting for someone to rescue her or to vanish. "Why did the dog bark?" she asked, barely audible. Kim replied, "He's trained to sense when people are in danger." Or afraid. Lucia looked up. For the first time, her eyes met Kim's. Something behind them, old fear-practice stillness, suggested this wasn't the first time someone had questioned her identity. She said nothing else, just sat back, hands protectively over her belly. Outside, the afternoon sun cast a line of light across the waiting area. Passengers hurried past, oblivious to the girl with no name, no past, and no voice strong enough to explain who she really was. Lucia sat stiffly in the plastic chair, her hands resting awkwardly over her stomach as if she were both guarding it and unsure whether to draw attention to it. Officer Kim remained seated across from her, fingers interlaced, voice calm but deliberate. "Lucia," she said again, "you said your husband would be picking you up. Where exactly is he meeting you?" Lucia didn't answer immediately. Her gaze flicked to the side toward the narrow window where the filtered light of late afternoon made the room look oddly sterile, too clean for how messy this moment felt. "Terminal 3, she said, uncertainty lacing her voice. Officer Ruiz, leaning against the wall beside the door, wrote that down. Earlier, Kim added gently, "You said he would be at Terminal 5. Which is it?" Lucia blinked slowly, her lips parting slightly as if trying to recall which answer she'd given first. "Maybe I mistake," she said. "I'm nervous." Kim nodded slightly. "That's okay. Flying can be stressful, especially if you're pregnant." She smiled, but Lucia didn't return it. She looked down again, pulling her hands tighter over her belly. Jet remained stationed just outside the door. Though Ruiz had tried guiding the dog away twice, Jet returned, every time positioning himself within line of sight, as though unwilling to break proximity. Other passengers had come and gone in the time since Lucia had been brought in, some with too many bags, others with too few, but Jet showed no interest in any of them. Just her. In the surveillance booth upstairs, TSA Supervisor Angela Lee watched the replay footage from Carousel 6. Jet's behavior was atypical, yes, but not inexplicable. Dogs sometimes reacted to emotional distress, especially highly trained ones. Still, something about the way Jet ignored surrounding suitcases and travelers to zero in on this one woman struck Angela as worth noting. She rewound again, watching as Jet pulled against the leash the moment Lucia stepped off the escalator. Not toward her bag, toward her. Downstairs, Ruiz stepped back into the room, now holding a printout of the flight manifests. "Lucia, there's no record of you arriving on a flight from Guatemala in the last 72 hours. Not under your name, not under a variation of it." Lucia's mouth tightened. She shifted in her seat, one foot tapping lightly against the linoleum. "I don't know why," she said. "I fly here, today." Ruiz didn't challenge her, not yet. "Do you have any documentation from the airline, a boarding pass, baggage ticket?" She shook her head. "No baggage," she said. "Only this," and held up the now crumpled customs declaration again. Outside the room, Jet gave a short bark, sharp, intentional. Ruiz looked through the glass. The dog's ears were rigid, not aggressive. Alert. Lucia flinched at the sound, her shoulders stiffening. "You okay?" Kim asked. "Yes," she said too quickly. "I'm fine." Her accent shifted slightly now. Less Central American, more vaguely Southern. Kim picked up on it. So did Ruiz. Lucia, Kim said softer now, "Where are you really from?" Lucia looked up. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. There was something resigned in them, as if the weight of continuing this version of the story had suddenly become too heavy to hold up. "Guatemala," she said after a pause. "Always." Ruiz pulled up a chair. "When did you leave Guatemala?" he asked. Lucia swallowed. "I come this week. Plane. Long time. But no record of that flight. And earlier you said you grew up there your whole life. Can you tell me the name of your hometown?" She paused, then said, Zona Cuatro. That's a district, Ruiz replied, not a town. Do you remember what school you went to? Lucia hesitated. Santa Maria, she said. Santa Maria, what? She glanced down. I forget. Ruiz looked at Kim. A pattern was emerging, and not a good one. She couldn't recall basic things. Not things a nervous immigrant might forget, like precise flight times or gate numbers, but deeply personal things. School place, even names. Either she had significant trauma, or she wasn't from Guatemala at all. Ruiz stood again and opened the door slightly, stepping into the hallway where Jet now sat facing the interview room. The moment he did, Jet stood up and pressed forward, sniffing toward the threshold. Ruiz blocked the dog with his leg gently but firmly. Jet, he murmured, what are you picking up? Jet whined, low in his throat. Ruiz had worked with this dog long enough to know the difference between a behavioral misfire and a gut-deep reaction. Jet wasn't alerting to substances. He was responding to something primal adrenaline, fear, something the body emits under extreme psychological stress. Ruiz looked back through the glass. Lucia hadn't moved, but her hands now clutched the armrest. Her knuckles were white. Inside, Kim watched the girl carefully. She reached for a notepad. Do you have any medical records, Lucia? You mentioned seeing a doctor. Lucia shook her head. Only in Guatemala. What clinic? Lucia froze. Hospital. She blinked, then said, No name? Do you know how far along you are? Lucia glanced at her belly, then quickly away. 5 months. Kim and Ruiz had both been around enough expecting mothers to know this wasn't a 5-month pregnancy, closer to 7, maybe more. Ruiz re-entered, sat again. He changed tack. Who told you to come to this airport today? Lucia's eyes widened just slightly, then narrowed. No one. You said you were meeting your husband. Yes, but you don't have his name or number. He is busy picking you up. Lucia's breathing quickened. Her eyes darted to the door. Ruiz leaned forward. Lucia, are you in trouble? She didn't answer. Her lip quivered slightly. I want to stay here, she said. I want to go. I understand. Kim said, her voice softening again. But we need to make sure you're safe, that your baby is safe. Can you tell us who you were with before you got here? Lucia blinked rapidly, a signal of panic beginning to creep in. No one. I come alone, through customs. Yes, but you weren't on a flight. As she stopped, then whispered, Please. I want to go. The door opened slightly. Another officer stepped in and handed Ruiz a small slip of paper, a handwritten note from airport surveillance. Subject observed exiting a black SUV at 11:42 a.m., no license plate visible on camera. Vehicle left immediately after drop-off. Ruiz looked at the note, then back at Lucia. You said you came on a plane. She didn't speak. We have you on camera being dropped off by a vehicle. Do you know who was driving it? She shook her head. Was it your husband? No, she said finally. Then who? Lucia opened her mouth to speak, then paused, eyes flickering again to the window. Her voice was so low Ruiz almost didn't hear it. I don't know his name. Kim leaned forward. Lucia. You need to tell us everything. Lucia's hands were now trembling. She closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they glistened with unshed tears. I don't remember, she said. And that's when Jet barked again, once sharp and sudden, and for the first time since entering that room, Lucia visibly jumped. Her hand shot to her belly, protective, defensive. Ruiz looked at Kim. Something deeper was unraveling here, not just a case of immigration fraud, not even a trafficking drop, something older, buried. And Lucia wasn't just afraid. She looked like someone who'd been hiding for years. Lucia sat now in a different room, less fluorescent, more sterile, away from the bustle of the terminal and the muted tension of the secondary screening area. The walls were blank except for a small clock ticking above a desk where an immigration liaison had joined the conversation. Officer Kim sat opposite a folder open in front of her. Officer Ruiz leaned against the far wall, arms folded, eyes on Lucia. The third person, a woman in a crisp gray suit with a badge clipped to her belt, introduced herself as Agent Porter from USCIS. Her voice was firm but not unkind. Lucia, she began flipping through the pages. You said earlier that you were here to meet your husband, but now you say fiancé. Which is it? Lucia sat quietly for a moment. We not marry yet, she murmured, but he say soon. In Houston. Okay, Porter nodded. Do you have a name for him? Lucia's brow furrowed. He call himself Nico. Last name, Lucia shook her head slowly. I not know. Kim exchanged a glance with Porter. Do you have his phone number? Again a pause. No. His address I forget. How did you plan to meet him? Lucia's lips trembled slightly. He say he find me. In Houston. Ruiz stepped closer. Lucia, people don't usually travel thousands of miles without knowing where they're going or who they're meeting. Can you tell us how you met this man? Lucia lowered her gaze. He helped me, she said softly. Help me come here. From Guatemala, Porter asked. Lucia nodded, but it was slow, reluctant, as if the word had lost meaning. Did you cross the border with him? No, she replied too quickly. He sent someone, who I don't know. The room fell quiet for a moment. Outside the door, Jet still paced gently, unable to settle his nails, tapping on the linoleum like a clock ticking louder with each unanswered question. Porter opened a new form. Lucia, I need to ask you about your background. Where you were born, where you lived, schools you attended. Basic questions. Is that all right? Lucia hesitated, then nodded. Where were you born? Guatemala. City Zona Cuatro. Porter glanced at Kim. That's not a city, that's a district. Can you tell us the name of the city? Lucia shifted in her seat. I don't remember. Okay, Porter continued gently. What about school? Where did you go to school as a child? In Guatemala. What was the name of the school? Lucia blinked rapidly. It was small. The name Santa Maria. Santa Maria what? A long pause. I don't know. Porter leaned forward slightly. Lucia, most people remember the name of the first school they attended, or at least the town. Are you sure you went to school in Guatemala? Lucia's eyes flickered. Yes. Do you remember your teacher's name or your classmates? She shook her head. Kim's voice softened. Lucia, are you sure you were in Guatemala all your life? Lucia opened her mouth and closed it again. Yes, but even she didn't sound convinced. Porter turned a page. Do you have any family in the United States? No, none at all, no. What about in Guatemala? Lucia hesitated longer this time. I don't talk to them. Who raised you? My aunt? Her name? Lucia's lips parted, but nothing came out. Do you remember where she lived, a village? Lucia said finally. What was it called? I don't remember. Ruiz rubbed his temples. Lucia, you're telling us you grew up in Guatemala, went to school there, lived with an aunt, and yet you don't remember a single name. Not the town, the school, the aunt, or even a friend. Lucia looked up then, her eyes wide and wet. I tried to forget. Her voice cracked slightly. It was not good there. Kim leaned in. You don't have to tell us everything right now. But we need to understand why you're here and who you are. Porter paused, then asked more gently, Lucia, have you ever been to the U.S. before? No, Lucia said quickly. This is my first time. Porter frowned slightly. And how did you get to this airport today? Lucia looked confused. I came. Alone. Yes. By plane. Yes. Lucia surveillance footage shows you being dropped off in a black SUV at 11:42 a.m. this morning. You weren't on any incoming flight. Do you want to change your answer? Lucia's hands clenched in her lap. Maybe I confuse. I tired. Who drove the SUV? I don't know. Did you know the person? No. Did he speak to you? Yes. In English or Spanish, both. Kim interjected gently. What did he say? Lucia swallowed. He said, I wait inside. Nico would find me. And you trusted him. I had no choice. Why not? Lucia fell silent. Her mouth opened slightly as if she were going to speak, but then she simply looked down again. The pause stretched too long to be comfortable. Ruiz looked at Porter, then back at Lucia. Were you ever hurt on the way here? Her eyes darted to his, then away. No, but she spoke too quickly again. Kim jotted a note. Porter set down the folder. Lucia, I believe you're afraid. I don't think you're here on your own terms. and I think you've been coached on what to say." Lucia shook her head. "No. I come because I want." "Do you?" Porter asked gently. "Because everything you're telling us is vague. You don't know your fiancé's name. You don't have his number. You don't know how you got here. And your memories of your own life are broken." Lucia's breathing grew shallow. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Please." "I rest." Kim stood slowly. "We'll let you rest, but we'll talk again. There are things you're not saying, and you're not safe until you do." As they stepped out into the hallway, Jet rose again. The moment Ruiz opened the door, Jet moved straight past him, sniffed the edge of the chair Lucia had been sitting in, then backed away with a low, unsettled sound in his throat. Kim glanced at Ruiz. Still focused on her, she muttered, even after 30 minutes away. Ruiz nodded slowly. "That dog's trying to tell us something," he said. Porter adjusted her badge. "Or maybe she is." Lucia sat quietly on the examination table, her arms crossed gently over her abdomen as the hum of fluorescent lights above filled the silence. The sterile smell of antiseptic clung to the room, mingling with the scent of latex gloves and freshly unwrapped gauze. The airport medical clinic was tucked into the rear corridor behind Terminal C, usually reserved for dehydration, sudden panic attacks, or the occasional twisted ankle. But today, it served as a temporary diagnostic station for a girl who'd become more mystery than passenger. Nurse Victoria Rains, a middle-aged woman with a composed demeanor and a sharp eye for inconsistencies, glanced at the intake form while slipping on a fresh pair of gloves. Officer Kim remained by the door, her notepad closed but her posture watchful. Lucia Victoria began gently, "We're just going to do a quick wellness check, all right. Nothing invasive. We need to make sure you and your baby are healthy." Lucia nodded faintly, her eyes darting to the clock, then the sink, then the floor. She didn't speak. "Can you lie back for me, please?" Victoria asked. Lucia obeyed without question. When her shirt lifted slightly to expose her belly, the nurse paused. "How far along did you say you were?" she asked. 5 months, Lucia replied, her accent soft but uneven. Victoria measured the curvature of the uterus with a gentle but practiced hands. "Feels more like 7, she muttered, then glanced at Kim. "Any known complications?" "She hasn't had any documented prenatal care," Kim answered. "We don't even know her blood type yet." Victoria nodded and resumed the examination. As she adjusted the stethoscope to check for fetal heartbeat, her eyes fell on a faint but distinct mark just above Lucia's right hip, slightly faded horizontal, about 2 inches long. She leaned in closer. "Lucia," she said, "do you know what this scar is from?" Lucia hesitated, then said softly, "No." "Have you ever had surgery I don't know? You don't remember being in a hospital?" Lucia shook her head. Victoria pressed lightly around the scar tissue. "This looks like an appendectomy," she said. "Do you know what that is?" Lucia looked confused. "I don't understand. It's when doctors remove your appendix. It's a common surgery usually performed when someone's had severe stomach pain. But this technique, this incision style..." She glanced again at Kim. "It's a laparoscopic cut, typical in U.S. hospitals, not common in rural Central America. Not unless she had access to a major city's private clinic, which seems unlikely based on everything else." Kim stepped closer. "Could she have had the procedure here in the U.S.? Victoria shrugged. "If she did, she doesn't remember it, but it's precise work, clean suture line, minimal scarring. This wasn't done in a village back room." She gently lowered Lucia's shirt. "We'll draw blood, do a basic panel. I'll also run an age estimation based on bone density and dental markers. It's not exact, but it'll give us something." Kim nodded. "Can we ask about her age?" Victoria turned to Lucia. "Lucia, how old are you?" Lucia blinked, then answered, "I think 20. "You think?" Victoria asked kindly. "Do you have a birthday? No. I mean, not written. When do you usually celebrate it sometimes?" "January, sometimes not." Victoria shared a glance with Kim again. She may not know her actual age. That's not unusual in cases of undocumented upbringing, but it does add to the confusion. She turned back to Lucia. "Do you remember how old you were when you first learned to read?" Lucia looked at the ceiling for a moment. "I don't remember reading much. "Did you go to school sometimes?" she said. "Not every day." Victoria stepped to the side table to prepare for a blood draw. "We'll find out more soon. But from what I'm seeing, she's younger than 20. "How much younger?" Kim asked. "My guess? 17, maybe 18. Kim's brow tightened. That would mean Lucia wasn't just vulnerable, she might be a minor. "If she's underage," Kim said quietly, "that changes the entire protocol." Victoria nodded. "And it raises a hell of a lot more questions." As the nurse swabbed Lucia's arm, the girl flinched slightly. "It's okay," Victoria murmured. "Just a small prick." Lucia didn't cry, didn't even wince when the needle went in. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, too practiced, too used to discomfort. As the vial filled, Victoria added, "We'll check for prenatal vitamins, nutritional deficiencies, signs of trauma. Her body might give us answers she won't or can't say." Kim walked to the sink, washed her hands slowly, trying to digest what they had so far. No name beyond Lucia M., no flight record, no documentation, no verifiable story, and now no clear memory of surgeries or age. She turned to Lucia again. "You said your aunt raised you. Do you remember how old you were when she started taking care of you?" Lucia shook her head. "I always with her." "Do you know her full name?" "No." "Do you remember where you lived with her near Forest?" "Small house." "Which country?" "Guatemala." Kim crouched beside the examination table, her tone gentler now. "Lucia, are you sure?" Lucia looked away, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I don't know," she whispered. "I say what I'm told. Who told you?" Kim asked, holding her gaze. Lucia didn't answer. Outside the clinic, Ruiz paced slowly, watching Jet through the window. The dog sat still now, but stared intently toward the room where Lucia was being examined. "He's locked in on her," Ruiz muttered. Still, one of the other officers joined him, handing over a preliminary background report. No matches yet on fingerprints, nothing in ICE databases. No flagged travel history, no known aliases. Ruiz flipped through the pages. "It's like she doesn't exist," he said. "Or she did once, then disappeared." Back inside, Victoria finished bandaging Lucia's arm. "You did great," she said. "We'll get your results soon. Can I get you something?" "Water." Lucia nodded faintly. "Thank you." As Victoria stepped out, Kim approached her near the door. "What do you think?" Victoria glanced over her shoulder. "She's scared, not just of us, but of herself. Like she's not sure what's real anymore." Kim nodded, then looked back at Lucia, now sitting in still silence, one hand resting over her stomach like a question she wasn't ready to ask. The soft glow of the monitor reflected off Agent Raymond Geller's glasses as he scrolled through the ICE database, sipping black coffee that had long gone cold. He had joined the case only that morning, called in by Officer Ruiz due to the inconsistencies in Lucia's statements and the growing suspicion that she might not be who she claimed to be. The age discrepancy, the American surgical scar, the untraceable origin story, it all pointed toward something deeper than undocumented immigration. Geller was seasoned, not quick to chase shadows, but something in the girl's stillness unsettled him. It wasn't just the fear in her eyes. It was the way she seemed carefully neutral, like someone who had rehearsed how to say nothing. On a hunch, he typed a query into the missing persons database, not just recent cases, but cold cases going back 10 years. He filtered for girls between ages 9 and 11 who disappeared without a trace, narrowing the geographic area to Florida, where he had worked a brief stint years ago and where several trafficking cases had overlapped. The results were long a cruel scroll of names and faces, each one an unresolved life. But midway down the list, one photograph caught his attention. A school portrait slightly faded, showing a brown-haired girl with almond eyes and a small scar under her left eyebrow. The resemblance hit hard. He leaned in and enlarged the image. It wasn't identical to Lucia, but the shape of the nose, the eyes, the set of her jaw. He pulled up the report. Name, Madison Lee Moreno. Nickname, Maddie. Age at time of disappearance, 9. Last seen May 3, 2016 in Clearwater, Florida. Disappeared from a public park while in the company of her mother's acquaintance, a man named Joel Varela. Joel had claimed Maddie wandered off while he answered a phone call. Police didn't buy it. His timeline was inconsistent. He had minor priors, mostly petty theft, but nothing that warranted detaining him at the time. And without evidence, the case stalled. The mother, Elena Moreno, had gone public for a few months. Press interviews, candlelight vigils, but eventually dropped from the spotlight. Trauma grief and lack of leads had fractured the case. Geller opened the scanned witness report. Joel Varela was described as charming but secretive, known to date single mothers. He had disappeared from Florida within a year of Maddie's vanishing and resurfaced sporadically in border towns. No formal charges had ever been filed, and he remained technically not a suspect, though internal notes clearly labeled him as the only person of interest. Geller opened Lucia's photo taken earlier in the day, placing it side by side with Maddie's school portrait. The eyes were strikingly similar, especially the arch of the right brow slightly higher than the left, something no one could fake or remember to imitate. He ran a facial similarity algorithm low confidence due to the time gap, but the percentage came back higher than expected 78.3% match, enough to warrant serious attention. He printed both photos and walked quickly toward Ruiz's desk, catching him just outside the interview area. "You've got to see this," Geller said, handing over the page. Ruiz studied the two images in silence. "Missing kid," he asked. 9 years ago, Clearwater, unsolved. No body, no ransom demand, just gone. "And you think she's Lucia?" "I think she might be," Maddie Geller said. "She wouldn't remember much, not at 9. Especially if she was taken far, told a new name isolated. You've heard how quiet she is. That's learned silence, conditioned." Ruiz looked back through the window at Lucia, now sitting with her knees pulled to her chest in the clinic recovery room, sipping water but otherwise motionless. "We need confirmation," Ruiz said. "But, yeah, damn, this makes sense," Geller nodded. "She said her aunt raised her, but can't name her. Can't name her town. Her supposed fiancé is a ghost. The driver who dropped her off left no plate trace. Everything is vapor. But that scar, the appendectomy that would have happened here, if she's Maddie, she didn't come from Guatemala. She was taken out of here." Ruiz rubbed his jaw. "We need to contact the family." "Already on it," Geller said. "Moreno still lives in Clearwater. Phone number was inactive, but I reached out through the original case detective. He's retired now, but still lives nearby. He remembers the case like it was yesterday." Ruiz turned toward the hallway. "Let's get Kim and loop her in." A few minutes later, all three stood in the observation room, while Lucia sat across from a new medical technician drawing follow-up blood. Kim stared at the side-by-side photos. "Jesus," she whispered. "It's her. It has to be. The chin is sharper now, but the eyes. If we're right, Ruiz said she's been missing since she was 9. That means she's 18 now, tops. Which makes her legally still a minor," Geller added. "Barely, but enough to trigger federal protections." Kim stepped away from the glass. "So she's not Lucia. She's Maddie, and she doesn't even know it." Ruiz shook his head. "Or she does. And someone trained her not to." "You think Varela took her?" Kim asked. "The guy vanished not long after she did. Last seen near Matamoros 3 years ago. That whole region's a hotbed for undocumented smuggling routes. We never found anything that tied him directly, but he was the only adult with her that day. If she's Maddie, and she's here now, someone had to move her across borders." 9 years is a long time, Geller said. "She may have been moved several times. Retaught a story over and over. By the time she arrived here, she wasn't escaping to someone. She was being handed off again. Then why now?" Kim asked. "Why drop her off at a major airport without ID, without a plan?" Geller folded his arms. Maybe someone got scared. Maybe she was pregnant and the risk got too high. Maybe they knew she'd be picked up and wouldn't talk. Ruiz looked back at Lucia through the glass. "But she will," he said. "Sooner or later. Something's going to break that silence." In that moment, Lucia looked up as if sensing their eyes on her. She didn't smile. She didn't move. But for a split second, her expression flickered an almost imperceptible recognition not of them, but of herself, as if something inside her had shifted. Geller stepped back. We need to get that case file reopened. Pull everything. Contacts, witnesses, family. Kim nodded. And we get a statement, carefully, no pressure. We ask her what she remembers. Before Guatemala. Ruiz narrowed his eyes. 'Cause if she remembers Florida, we'll know for sure. The call came through dispatch just before sunset, a man at Terminal B claiming to be the relative of a detained young woman. He gave a name Lucia M. He said he was her tío, her uncle, come to pick her up. The timing made Ruiz's skin crawl. Lucia had not made any calls. No known contact had been alerted. No one should have known where she was, let alone that she was being held for further questioning. Geller met Ruiz at the security checkpoint overlooking the arrivals area. Down below, the man stood with forced ease, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his white button-down creased and tucked into faded jeans, a thin gold chain visible around his neck. His hair was slicked back, graying at the temples, and he held a bouquet of small flowers, cheap convenience store kind. He said he's her uncle, Geller asked. That's the story. Doesn't look nervous, Geller noted. Looks prepared. Ruiz scanned the crowd. Let's bring him up. Separately, 2 TSA officers escorted the man through a side gate up the stairs and into a small interview room. Kim joined them, watching from behind the mirror as Ruiz entered first. Sir Ruiz greeted, "Thank you for waiting. Can I get your name?" The man offered a wide smile. "Carlos Montalvo," he said in Spanish. "She is my niece. I'm here to take her home." Ruiz nodded, switching fluently into Spanish. "You said she's your niece. Can you tell us a bit about your relationship with her?" When you last saw her, Carlos looked confused for half a second, then recovered. "We haven't seen each other in many years. I live in Houston now. Her mother, my sister, she stayed in Guatemala. Lucia came to be with family." "What's her mother's name?" Ruiz asked. "Rosa. Rosa Maria." Ruiz flipped his notepad. "And your sister, Rosa Maria, still lives where in a small town?" Carlos said vaguely. "Not sure exactly. Communication has been hard. Yet she arranged for her daughter to fly internationally to meet you." Carlos shifted. "I helped arrange the travel, paid for it. Lucia needed a better life." "Did you book her flight? A friend did." "What airline, I don't know. I gave him the money. Do you have a copy of the itinerary?" Carlos paused, then smiled again. "No, I just came to welcome her." Ruiz closed his notebook. "One moment." He stepped out and handed the man's name to Geller. Within minutes, a quiet alarm rang through the system. Carlos Montalvo had been detained by Border Patrol 3 years prior for suspected human smuggling across the Texas border. At the time, he'd been driving a van with 6 undocumented women inside, including a teenage girl listed as underage. Due to lack of conclusive evidence and conflicting testimonies, charges didn't stick, but he remained flagged in federal records, currently out on supervised release awaiting a reopened investigation tied to an expanded trafficking probe. "He's not an uncle," Geller said grimly. "He's a handler." Ruiz returned to the room with Kim close behind. This time the tone shifted. "Carlos," Ruiz said, "we're verifying your information. While we wait, we'd like Lucia to see you, see if she recognizes you." "Of course," Carlos said smoothly. "She'll be so happy." They brought Lucia down the hallway slowly. Her steps were hesitant, slower than before. Her hands clasped over her stomach again, a gesture of defense rather than fatigue. When she entered the room and saw Carlos, she froze. Carlos opened his arms with a big smile. "Mi Nina," he said. "Ven aquí." Lucia didn't move. Her body stiffened. Her eyes darted toward Ruiz, then Kim, then back to Carlos. "Lucia," Carlos said again, now approaching a step. She took one step back. Her voice was barely audible. "No." The room went quiet. Kim placed a gentle hand on Lucia's shoulder. "Do you know this man?" Lucia stared ahead. He told me he was family." "Is he?" Kim asked softly. Lucia shook her head. "He came to the house. I was told to go with him." "Which house?" "I don't know the address," she whispered. "It was in the hills, trees everywhere, the road was dirt." Carlos now looked more tense, his smile faltering. "She's confused. Long journey. She's had a hard time." Ruiz's tone hardened. "Lucia, do you want to go with him?" Her answer was clear. "No. Has he ever hurt you?" Kim asked, her voice quiet, urgent. Lucia hesitated. He told me not to talk." Carlos raised his hands. "This is a mistake. I'm here to help her. I came all this way." "Sit down," Ruiz interrupted. "Now." Officers entered, motioning Carlos to the side. He didn't resist, but his expression changed cool and calculating, now his smile wiped clean. As they let him out, Lucia sank into the chair, visibly trembling. Kim knelt beside her. "You did the right thing." Lucia shook her head slowly. "He said if I ever told anyone they'd send me back, that no one would believe me." "We believe you," Kim said. "You're not going back anywhere." In the hall, Ruiz watched as Carlos was placed in temporary holding. "Pull every file on that smuggling case," he told Geller. "We've got our connection." Geller nodded. "If he's linked to Maddie's disappearance, we'll find it." Ruiz looked back toward Lucia, now sitting alone. Her back turned to the door, shoulders hunched. "We need to dig deeper," he said. "He's not the top, just another link in the chain." Geller moved quickly through the corridor, his phone pressed tight to his ear as he spoke with the Clearwater Police Department, his voice low and deliberate. The confirmation from Lucia, her refusal to go with Carlos, her whispered admission that he wasn't family, her fear had shifted the case from suspicion to probable identity recovery. Ruiz stood nearby, watching through the glass as Lucia sat motionless in the waiting area, eyes fixed on a water stain in the ceiling tile. She hadn't spoken since the encounter. Her shoulders remained tense, hands folded on her lap, but her breathing had begun to slow as if part of her was finally allowing stillness. Geller turned, covering the mic. "Clearwater PD is patching me through to the original case detective. Moreno still lives in the same apartment in Largo. They want to proceed cautiously." Ruiz nodded. "Let's not spook her. We'll send over the updated image for facial comparison. No assumptions." Geller returned to the line, stepping into a nearby office. He uploaded the high-resolution photo of Lucia, taken during intake, the moment where her gaze had turned sharp distant. It wasn't just a portrait. It captured something raw beneath the surface, something stripped of performance. He sent it to the detective, tagging it against the cold case file for Maddie Moreno. The reply came back in under 30 minutes, faster than expected. Detective Jorge Salinas, retired but still assisting on legacy cases, called personally. "I've seen the image," he said flatly. "I want to be cautious, but I've looked at that face for 9 years. It's her." Geller's heart pounded. "We need someone closer, someone who can make the call without hesitation." "You mean the mother?" Salinas replied. "Yes. She never gave up, you know. Didn't go on TV after the 2nd year, but she still calls me every May 3rd. Would she be willing to see the photo?" Salinas paused. "She doesn't need to. I just sent it to her. I'm waiting on her call." Geller paced slowly as the silence stretched. 2 minutes, then 3. Then his phone buzzed with a Florida number. He answered. "Agent Geller." The voice on the other end was unsteady but unmistakably clear. "That's my daughter, Elena Moreno," said, breath-catching. "That's my Maddie." Geller stood still. "Are you certain? I don't care if she's taller, if her voice is different." "That's her. I know the eyes. I know the way she tilts her chin when she's scared. I used to comb that exact part of her hair every morning before school." Her voice cracked. "I don't need a DNA test. That's my baby." Ruiz stepped in quietly, watching Geller's face shift. Geller put the call on speaker. "Miss Moreno," he said gently, "we'll proceed with the next steps. We'll need to verify identity for legal protocols, but I believe you. You've just given us a direction we didn't have before." Elena breathed out slowly. "Is she okay? Is she safe?" "She's being protected," Geller said. "She's pregnant. She's been through trauma, possibly years of coercion, but she's not alone anymore." "She doesn't remember me, does she?" Elena asked. "She doesn't know who she is." Geller looked through the glass at Lucia, who still hadn't moved. "Not yet, but she's beginning to ask questions." Elena exhaled. "I can come. I'll fly tonight." We're working with social services and legal on the best way forward. We'll keep you updated. Thank you for trusting us." When the call ended, Geller looked at Ruiz. "It's her, Maddie Moreno. Case from 2016. She was never taken abroad. She was hidden in plain sight, moved through the states under aliases. This wasn't a smuggling victim. This was a kidnapped child." Ruiz's jaw clenched. She's been erased for 9 years, and they almost got away with it. Kim entered then, holding a printed copy of the old case photo. She placed it beside the one of Lucia. "It's the same girl," she said, "even the birthmark near her jawline. It faded, but it's there." Ruiz nodded. "Let's contact Child Protective Services. If she's under 18, she's still legally protected," Geller added. "And let's prep her." Slowly. "If she's been told her whole life that her past didn't exist, we can't just drop it on her like a bomb." Ruiz agreed. "Let's give her something familiar, something from the file." They returned to the waiting area where Lucia sat her back straighter now, as if anticipating the return of questions. Kim approached with soft steps, holding the photo in hand. "Lucia," she said gently, "can I show you something?" Lucia looked up slowly. Kim knelt beside her, offering the photo. "Do you recognize this girl?" Lucia took the photo with shaking fingers. Her eyes scanned the image, then paused. Then narrowed. "She looks like me," she whispered. "Do you remember anything about that dress?" Kim asked. Lucia frowned. "Maybe. I wore blue once. A birthday." "You were 9, Kim said quietly. "Your name was Maddie." Lucia stared harder. "That name. I think I heard it. Somewhere." Kim nodded. "It might be your name. We're trying to help you find out." Lucia blinked, clearly overwhelmed, but not rejecting the idea. "Why would someone change my name?" "Sometimes people do terrible things," Kim said softly. "And they make others forget who they are." Lucia traced the edge of the photo with her thumb. "I dreamed of a woman. She had short hair, and she smelled like vanilla." Kim smiled faintly. "That might have been your mom." "Is she real?" Lucia asked, voice suddenly small. Kim nodded. "Very. And she's waiting." The room was quiet, except for the soft clicking of the clock on the wall and the occasional rustle of Kim's notebook pages. Lucia sat across from her shoulders, hunched slightly, eyes flickering between the floor and the edge of the table. The room had no mirror this time. No observation glass, just 4 walls and one soft light above. Geller and Ruiz waited outside, allowing space. "You said you remembered a park." Kim began gently, her tone careful not to press. "Can you tell me more about that?" Lucia hesitated, her fingers tightening around the paper cup in her hands. "There was grass," she said slowly, "and swings. I think. I remember sitting on something metal. It was hot. I wanted ice cream." Her voice thinned out near the end, as if embarrassed to admit such a simple desire. "Was anyone with you?" Kim asked. "A man." Lucia set her brow, furrowing. "He held my hand. Not my dad, not my mom. Someone else. I think my mom's friend." "Do you remember what he looked like? Tall? Black shirt, beard?" She closed her eyes. "He told me we were going to surprise Mommy." Kim nodded, noting everything. What happened next? Lucia opened her eyes again, but they were distant. "He put me in a car. It smelled like gas. And something sweet, maybe candy." She paused. "Then we drove for a long time, and we didn't go back." "Where did you go?" "A house first," Lucia said. "Not big, near a river maybe. I remember the sound of water at night." Her voice drifted, not fearful, just numb. "After that, another place. Bigger, dry, like dirt all the time. Everything was brown." "Did anyone else live there?" Kim asked. Lucia nodded. "Other girls, I think. We didn't talk much. There were rules. If we spoke wrong, someone came. Who a woman, sometimes a man. They shouted in Spanish. But not just Spanish, it was mixed, like not real words sometimes, like commands." "Can you remember any?" Lucia stared at the wall. "Al suelo, boca cerrada, mira abajo." Kim translated mentally on the floor, mouth closed, eyes down. "Basic control phrases. Did they let you outside only for work?" Lucia said. Cleaning, animals, cutting food. Sometimes we moved things. Did you go to school? Lucia shook her head. No papers, no names, no birthdays. We were just there. Kim paused. How long? 7 years, Lucia said. I counted summers. When the air changed, did you ever try to run? No. There was nowhere to go. No one had shoes, no road signs. What did they call you? Lucia swallowed. Nina, or sometimes Lucy. They said it was easier. Did anyone ever ask your real name? No one cared. She whispered. You just did what they said. Kim leaned forward. Lucia Maddie, when did it change? When did you leave? Lucia's eyes darkened. One day I got sick, my belly hurt, they took me in a truck. A man drove, not the usual one. He dropped me in a city, gave me money. Said to wait at the airport, said Nico would find me. He never came. Kim nodded slowly. So they got rid of you. I think they were scared, Lucia said, of the baby. They didn't want a hospital. Her hand drifted to her stomach again. I didn't even know I was pregnant until he said it. Who was the father? Lucia's mouth tightened. One of them, I don't know. It wasn't my choice. Kim reached across the table but didn't touch her, just placed her hand close. You don't have to explain that, not now. Lucia blinked. A tear didn't fall, but the wetness lingered at the corner. I didn't know I was real, she said quietly. I thought I was made up. A name someone gave to a girl who didn't exist. Kim held her breath. You're real. You were Maddie. You were taken, and you survived. Lucia looked up slowly. Am I still her? You always were, Kim said, even when you didn't know. I remember one more thing, Lucia said after a long pause. My mom's perfume, vanilla, and the sound she made when she laughed, like a song. Kim smiled faintly. She remembers you too. Lucia didn't react right away. Then finally she whispered, Does she want me back? She's already on her way. The Protective Services Center was quiet that morning. A small building tucked behind the airport perimeter, just far enough from the terminals to feel like a different world. Inside, soft pastel walls and laminated posters tried to make the space less institutional. Ruiz and Kim stood near the reception desk, watching through the glass into a private room where Lucia Maddie sat curled on the couch, her knees drawn, close arms wrapped around herself as if holding in pieces not yet ready to fall apart. She had been told gently that someone was coming to see her, someone who had known her before, all the names and hiding and silence. She hadn't asked who. She had simply nodded once and turned away, breathing shallow but steady. The moment Elena Moreno entered, time seemed to hold its breath. She paused in the doorway, her hand gripping the edge of the frame as if bracing for impact. Her eyes immediately welled up not from doubt or fear, but from a recognition so visceral it seemed to strike her at the bone. Maddie didn't look up at first. Elena stepped forward slowly a few steps into the room, then froze when her daughter's body tensed. Maddie, she whispered, voice cracking. It's me, Miha, Mommy. Maddie's head jerked toward her. The expression that crossed her face was raw disbelief, panic, confusion, all at once. She stood up suddenly, stumbling back against the wall, breathing fast. No, she gasped. No, you're not real. You're not. Elena took one step forward but stopped herself. It's okay. You don't have to remember right now. But I do. I remember everything. Maddie shook her head violently, clutching her arms, tears spilling now. She said you were gone. They said you gave me away. Elena's own tears fell freely. Never, she whispered, never Maddie. I never stopped looking. I never gave up. I couldn't. Maddie's breathing turned erratic, her back pressing harder into the wall. Why do I remember your voice? She said in a broken whisper. But I don't know your face. Elena stepped closer now, still slow. Because they took you too young. But your heart remembers. That's what matters. Maddie closed her eyes tightly. I don't know what's real. I do, Elena said. And with that, she opened her arms, not demanding, just waiting. The moment hovered in silence. And then, without warning, Maddie stepped forward as if pulled by something older than memory, something deeper than thought. Her arms reached out her body, folding into her mother's like it had 1,000 times in dreams she never believed were hers. She buried her face into Elena's shoulder, sobbing so hard her body shook. Elena held her tighter than words, tighter than time. "You're home," she whispered again and again. Outside the room, Kim pressed her lips together, blinking quickly. Ruiz turned away, jaw clenched. Geller stepped into the hallway just then, holding a printout. "It's confirmed," he said grimly. Carlos Montalvo was back at the airport. He wasn't acting alone. We intercepted a phone call from a burner he used. They were coordinating a pickup. Where, Ruiz asked. "A warehouse lot near Bakersfield. It's been used before as a birthing center, really just a place to hold undocumented pregnant women. They keep them there until the baby's born. Then they use debt to bind them into forced labor, and Maddie was next," Kim said darkly. "That's why they dropped her off. He didn't lose track of her. He was repositioning her." "Exactly," Geller said. "He came back because he had realized we were closing in. He panicked, tried to reassert the pickup, but TSA flagged him. We've got him in custody now." "What was he charged with?" Ruiz asked. "Human trafficking conspiracy, attempted abduction, interstate coercion. He's not walking away this time." Kim exhaled slowly, and she finally found her way out. She never had a chance, Geller said, but somehow she survived all of it. Ruiz nodded. And now, she remembers just enough to fight back. Inside the room, Maddie still clung to her mother, but her sobs had softened. Her breathing slowed. Elena stroked her hair, whispering something only they could hear. Maddie pulled back slightly, her face red and wet, but calmer. "Is my name Maddie?" she asked. Elena nodded, smiling through tears. "Yes, mija, Madison Lee Moreno, that's your name, and you can be her again, or Lucia, or both, whatever feels right." Maddie looked down, then touched her stomach gently. "He doesn't have a name yet. You'll give him one," Elena said. "You'll give him a name and a life that's safe. I don't know if I'm strong enough," Maddie whispered. Elena brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You already are. Look how far you came just to survive." Maddie sat back down on the couch slowly, her hand never leaving her mother's. The reunion was imperfect, jagged with grief and healing, but it was real, and that was more than she ever imagined she'd find. The room where Maddie sat now was different. Still official, still guarded, but the walls were painted warm, and the chair where she waited was soft enough to remind her she was no longer trapped. The air smelled faintly of citrus, and the light came from a window not artificial, not buzzing. Across from her sat a woman with kind eyes and a quiet voice, a trauma counselor assigned by the Federal Victim Protection Unit. Maddie, no longer just Lucia, had begun to speak again, more than just fragments and survival phrases. She had been granted protective status under the Federal Witness Program. Her identity secured her future, separated legally and physically from the men who once controlled her life. The court had moved fast, especially after her DNA confirmed the link to Elena Moreno. Public attention had been tightly managed, with only limited press statements confirming a trafficking survivor had been identified in a joint TSA ICE operation, and that further charges were pending. But behind the scenes, the revelations had shaken federal task forces awake. Maddie's testimony, along with intel gathered from devices found on Carlos Montalvo, had led to the exposure of a trafficking ring that had operated quietly across multiple states for over a decade. Using a web of fake families, falsified guardianship papers, and isolated properties, the ring had funneled dozens, likely hundreds of undocumented women and girls through a network of control, often under the guise of protective custody or safe housing for migrants. The so-called maternity houses were the latest evolution, offering shelter to pregnant women in exchange for future work, which in reality meant years of unpaid labor or further exploitation. With Maddie's timeline, investigators were able to link similar cases from Texas, Arizona, and parts of California, many of which had remained unsolved or misclassified as simple immigration violations. Maddie's courage to speak to name places, faces, patterns allowed authorities to draw the lines between what had once seemed like scattered tragedies. But through it all, one detail remained as quietly astounding as it was pivotal. Jet, the TSA K-9, who had refused to follow protocol, who had ignored the trail of suspicious baggage and instead locked onto Maddie from the moment she stepped into the terminal. At first, his behavior had seemed off-script a distraction, but when reviewed by senior handlers, the footage revealed what was later described in a formal commendation as advanced behavioral perception. Jet had not detected narcotics or explosives. He had reacted to the acute emotional distress Maddie was emitting, her scent laced with cortisol adrenaline and the kind of fear that lingered long after a threat had passed. Most K9s, even well-trained, could not interpret this type of signal beyond basic agitation, but Jet had years of experience with high-intensity deployments, including post-disaster search and rescue. He had learned to recognize the difference between alert and panic, between simple stress and the deep freeze of someone conditioned not to run, not to scream, only to comply. The day Maddie was reunited with her mother, Jet had been awarded an official citation for service above and beyond standard expectation. His handler, Officer Ruiz, had accepted on his behalf the ceremony, quiet but sincere. Ruiz later told Kim that Jet had done more with one look than we could have with a week of paperwork. Maddie asked to see Jet one more time before she left the facility. When they brought him in, she didn't speak at first. She just knelt on the floor and Jet walked over, calmly sitting beside her. She placed her hand on his shoulder and for a long time they stayed like that, still breathing the same quiet air. In time, Maddie began to rebuild her world. Elena moved temporarily to a safe location, joining a program for reunited families of trafficking survivors. Together, they began to relearn each other, what foods Maddie liked, now what music Elena still played when she cleaned the house. They started small letters drawings, sharing recipes from before. The language came slower memory in pieces, but trust was something they chose every day. Maddie took therapy seriously. She wanted to understand not just what happened, but how to live beyond it. She spoke sometimes of the other girls, the ones still out there. She didn't remember all their names, but she remembered the way they hummed when no one was watching, the quiet ways they comforted each other when punishment was near. Her voice carried a weight when she spoke of them. Not guilt, exactly. Something older, something like a promise. The prosecutors built cases on her words, but they protected her fiercely. She would not be paraded or pressed. She had done enough. She was not evidence, she was someone's daughter. In an official debrief, when asked why she had not cried or screamed when first taken, Maddie had replied simply, "Because I didn't know I was allowed to." That sentence was later quoted in a federal report on survivor-centered justice, a reminder that rescue is not just about physical escape, it is about giving someone permission to exist again. Maddie now walks in a world that once forgot her, and yet she holds her place in it like a quiet defiance. She doesn't smile all the time, but when she does, it is real. And when she writes her new name, Maddie Lucia Moreno, it is not just a signature, it is a statement. That she was taken, but not erased. That she was lost, but not broken. That someone listened. That someone stayed. That a dog who couldn't speak gave voice to her pain. And because of that, she is alive. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more true, powerful stories to light. Which moment hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We read every single one.